Hi, everyone, and welcome to Self-Care and Supervision, the third webinar of this four-part series on self-care by NCSD. My name is Leandra Lacey, and I'm the Senior Manager of Capacity Building and Member Engagement for NCSD, or the National Coalition of STD Directors. For those of you who may be joining us for a webinar for the first time ever, NCSD is a national public health membership organization representing health department STD directors, their support staff, and community-based partners across 50 states, 7 large cities, and 5 U.S. territories. We acknowledge the hard work that our members do to serve their communities and promote public health. The COVID pandemic and the heightened visibility of racial injustices in our country have further exacerbated feelings of stress for many people, especially for you all, given that you are often working in environments with limited resources. We want to offer this series as a way to provide tangible resources and tools for self-care and creating team environments where self-care is a priority, all with a trauma-informed and intersectional lens. So the first 2 webinars in this series, occurring in August, focused on giving you some background on what self-care is and how to establish it for yourself. In the links box at the bottom of your screen, you'll see that I have the recording and slides from the August 12th webinar and from the August 26th webinar if you'd like to access those. Today's webinar will focus on supervisors and how to encourage self-care with your employees at your organization. So really looking forward to the extension of the series going forward today. So just a few logistics. All of you have been muted. If you have questions or need technical help during this webinar, please use the chat box on the right side of your screen. If you need technical help, you can also private message the hosts, which are me and my colleague, Tiffany Haskell. All questions for our presenter will be addressed at the end, and he may address them throughout the presentation as well. So just keep them in the chat box, and we'll keep a queue of them as they come up. So this webinar is also being recorded. The recording and the presentation slides will be emailed to those that registered, and these items will also be placed on the NCSD website, just like they were for the first 2 parts of this series. So just an intro for our presenter for the series, Robert George, who has worked for over 20 years in the field of HIV. His experience has included case management, behavioral health, and housing services, as well as prevention services, including syringe access programming. He has managed and supported programs in both urban and rural areas of Colorado. For a brief time, he worked as a consultant, providing training and capacity building to HIV case management programs across the country. Currently, Robert is the program manager for the Ryan White Part A program in Denver. He and his team are dedicated to providing high-quality support to programs providing HIV care and treatment services in the Denver area. Robert uses a trauma-informed approach in his work in order to create healthy environments for programs and providers to do their best work and effectively serve their communities. So thank you so much, Robert, for your presentation today. We're happy to have you on for this third part. I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Leandra. I'm sorry if you're hearing some background noise today. We actually had snow yesterday in Colorado and in Denver. We had 100-degree temperatures over the weekend, but after the weekend was over, we had snow, which in some ways we welcomed because we've had some really horrible wildfires burning, and the air quality has been really smoky, so we actually welcome the snow and that fresh air coming in, but it's been really unusual to have snow this early in September. So folks at my condo complex are out trying to clean things off and taking care of fallen limbs and that sort of thing. So I apologize for any of that background noise. Yeah, today we're going to focus on self-care and supervision. This is a topic that is very near and dear to me. I have been supervising for about 16 years, and it's been quite an experience. I started out as a supervisor not really knowing much about what it meant to be a supervisor and what that responsibility entailed. I was given the position just because I was doing a good job in my previous role, and someone got the bright idea that I should be a supervisor. And so I made a lot of mistakes initially. I did things that weren't really helpful and were really more about me than about taking care of my team and supporting them. And so I had some really great mentors and some people that I work with that inspired me to really learn how to improve my supervision skills and look at things a little differently, and as well as take in consideration the experience of the people that I was supporting as a supervisor. And also over time, I learned about what it meant to be trauma-informed in approach, and I was able to take some of those concepts and translate those into my experience and approach as a supervisor. So through all of the experiences, through all the mistakes that I made, through all of the support that I got, I started to learn and grow. And currently I supervise a team. There are 10 of us on the team, and so I have 9 folks that I supervise. And it's, I'm still learning with them too, because they're a new team, they're a new set of people, they have different needs, we're doing different work. So being a supervisor for me is a continual learning and growing process. And I really encourage you, if you're a supervisor, to just embrace all of that opportunity that comes with being a supervisor. Leandra gave an introduction to me. Again, here is my contact information. I do work for the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. We manage the Ryan White Part A grant for the Denver Transitional Grant Area. My team and I do. This is a newer position for me. I've worked in the Denver TGA for all of my career, but this is a new position in our area, and I've been really so fortunate to be able to have that position, as well as having the opportunity to work with our system. I do want to say that the information I'm sharing with you today comes from my research and study around trauma-informed care and self-care concepts, and this is really the work that I've put together from all of the resources that I've worked with. And this is definitely not a definite guide or answer to self-care or supervision. I also want to say that I'm not a mental health professional, and I don't proclaim to be one. I do want to acknowledge that different providers train differently on this topic. And I really encourage you to engage in different trainings around this topic of supervision and self-care, or self-care in general. I encourage you to do some of your own research and look at different resources and different reading materials that you can engage in to learn more about this topic. But I do hope that what I'm able to present today is helpful to you, and hopefully gets you to start thinking about the topic of self-care and your role as a supervisor. So our structure today, I'll be presenting the content as Leandra was talking about. You can ask questions during the chat. I will pay attention to the chat. I can see it pretty clearly. So if there's something that comes up that I feel like we can address now, I'll do that. But also just know that questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. I think we're going to take time at the end to unmute so you can ask things verbally if you want, or if it's more comfortable for you, you can also put them in the chat. But hopefully that will be a time for us to have some conversation and engagement. So our objectives for this training today are, first of all, we're going to define 6 trauma-informed principles and how they relate to self-care and supervision. We are going to be able to describe your own self-care plan and strategies, as well as describe a process for creating a culture of self-care at your organization. So we're going to focus on these three objectives today. So one of the big questions sometimes as supervisors, especially if you might be new to supervision, is where do I start? Where do I start to incorporate a value of self-care into my role as a supervisor? Before we get into that, I want to get a sense of the participants today. So Leandra, if we could put up the first poll question, so we can get a sense of who's with us. Yeah, so answer this question. Are you a supervisor? I want to know who in our group today is a supervisor. Yes, no, or maybe you want to be a supervisor. So if you could answer that. All right, let's go ahead and broadcast those results, please, Leandra. So it looks like it's about 50-50 supervisors and people who answered the poll. 50% are supervisors and 50% not. We're still getting some results in here, but most folks on the call today are supervisors, and one person would like to be a supervisor. That's exciting because we want people to want to be supervisors. It's not an easy position, and as I said, sometimes we're thrown into it just because we were doing a good job in our previous role. But if you're really passionate about supervision and being a leader, that's really exciting. So, okay, thanks for that poll. Take it down. Okay. So where do we start? I think we have to start with ourselves, with ourselves. And if you've been in my previous trainings, you know that I ask a lot of questions. I pose a lot of questions because I don't really take the approach of being prescriptive, but I like to get people to be thinking about things and related to these topics. So I like to pose a lot of questions for yourself so you can do that exploration and just get to know yourself a little bit more, where you are at with things, what your needs are, where you might need to grow, what kind of support, additional support you might need. So yeah, the first one is, how are you doing with your own self-care? If we're creating a culture or an environment with self-care in your organization, it starts with you. You have to have a value of self-care and doing your own work. That's a really important piece of all of this. So, because if you're able to take care of your own self-care, then hopefully you're able to model self-care practice to your staff. And I also just think it's important to be authentic in how you're modeling self-care and how you're engaging in your own self-care, and just being able to communicate like that sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's not always possible, and sometimes there's some barriers and challenges that I have around self-care, and just being honest about that with yourself, but also with your team. It's better to do that than be performative around self-care. If you're performative, it's not really authentic, it's not really true, and then I think you have a harder time making a connection with what self-care really means and how you can talk about that with your team. The next question is, how are you showing up? How are you showing up for work? Are you a friendly person at work? Are you a grouchy person at work? Do you have that reputation of showing up in a bad mood and people need to stay away from you? Are you showing up in a way where you're encouraging your team? Are you being supportive of your team and cheering them on? Or are you showing up in a way where you're focused on the negative and focused on the things that are going wrong? Just the frame of mind that you're in and how you show up for work can really set the tone for the rest of your team and for how the work goes. And for me, we manage the federal grant, the federal Ryan White grant, the Part A grant for Denver. And I keep talking about my team about how we are taking care of ourselves and how we work with each other. That trickles down to our relationships with our providers, which ultimately trickles down to how to affect the experience of our clients. And so it's really important for us to show up for work in a way that's reflective of our own self-care, as reflective of our own health. And if we're not in a good place around that, then that might be a signal to us in some communication that we have some work to do for ourselves. I just take the role of being a supervisor very seriously, and I take the responsibilities that I have very seriously, and I know that it's important for me to take care of myself so that I can show up and do my best work and be the best support for my staff. Because I recognize that each day is filled with great things, with hard things, with frustrating things, with successes and challenges, that there are many relationships that are healthy, that are constructive and productive, but there are also a lot of relationships that are hard to navigate. And I also recognize that I make mistakes all day long, but I also recognize that I do some good. And so just being aware of that and just being aware of how that's affecting you and how you are behaving in your role and with your team and with your peers is a really important first step to take. I make sure that in this, we're all working remotely. We're not in our office right now, and so I have to meet with my team for one-on-one sessions or for work time through Zoom or through our Teams software. And I just make sure that every time I get on a meeting with them that I greet them with a smile and a genuine appreciation for being able to see them. And, you know, when we're supervisors, it doesn't mean that we like everybody that's on our team. It doesn't mean that we get along with everybody on our team. It's okay for that to be the case, and it's okay to acknowledge that. But what really is important is how we interact with each other. And having that friendly, kind approach is really important, and it can really set the tone for the interaction that you have with that person. I can see it. It's so interesting being on these virtual platforms that how you can really have more of a face-to-face contact with someone. And I can really see how my approach and how I'm showing up in our interaction can really affect the team member that I'm working with. Another thing that I think is really important is to do a values assessment for yourself, taking time to get to know what is important to you. And when you know what's important to you, that can give you a lot of direction and guidance in your work. You can have, when you do a values exploration process, you might have some professional values, you might have some personal values, and those might be two different sets of values, but they could overlap and connect in a lot of ways. I think it's a really interesting and actually fun exercise to do to explore what your values are. I've included down in the files and handouts at the bottom of the screen a values exercise worksheet that you can download and that you can follow the instructions around and do some of your own values exploration. And the last thing that I'd asked myself this question many times, and I still ask myself this question, is what kind of supervisor do I want to be and how do I get there? Am I being that supervisor that I want to be? What kind of supervisor does my team want me to be? And am I that supervisor? How do I get there? What steps do I need to take? What training do I need to take? What guidance do I need to take? Do I need to find a mentor or a coach, someone that I really admire and respect and who is also doing supervision that I might be able to learn from? That can be really helpful in your process of creating a definition for how you want to be as a supervisor as well. I've had many great mentors and teachers in my career, and I still keep in touch with them. In fact, earlier today, I talked to a former mentor of mine and just running by a situation and getting her take on it and seeing what insight she might have for me. And she really helped me to see things that I wasn't aware of just on my own, and it was so helpful. So I encourage you to seek out those relationships with people that you admire and respect, and find the training and the support and guidance that you need. So let's check in. Again, we're going to do a couple of more poll questions. If we can do poll question number 2, Leandra, we could put that one up. Yeah, I just want to check in with you all around this. So those of you who are supervisors, do you feel like you're doing a good job as a supervisor? Yes, no, not sure. Yeah, and it's okay to be not sure. It's okay to say no, whatever is working for you. And it may be actually be a hard question to answer as well. All right, some folks answering that. We'll give it a couple more seconds here. All right, so let's go ahead and broadcast those results. So yeah, a lot of folks are not sure. And I think that is a really valid place to be. Sometimes we don't know. We're not getting feedback. We're not getting feedback from our supervision, our supervisors, our leaders, our managers. And not always are we having those interactions with our staff to really know what their experience with us could be as well. So, all right, thank you for that poll question. Let's do poll question number 3, please. Let's try that one too. All right, I just want to ask the question, what is your biggest challenge as a supervisor? Is it too much work and responsibility? Is it motivating your team? Is it a lack of organizational support? Is it maintaining your own self-care, one of the challenges you have? Is it all of the above, or is it other? Something else? All right. Go ahead and broadcast those. And yeah, it looks like folks are saying that motivating their team is a challenge as a supervisor, and then all of the above, which is too much work and responsibility, motivating your team, lack of organizational support, and maintaining your own self-care. I want to just take a moment to check in with Leandra to see if we're okay. Is everybody able to participate okay? Are we still having some troubles? Do I need to slow down?
I think it's fine. I can hear you just fine, and the pace seems fine.
Okay, good. I just wanted to check. I know you were doing some troubleshooting in the chat, so I just wanted to see.
If anyone's having an issue with accessing the poll or voting, you can just put it in the chat, and I'll try to troubleshoot.
All right. Thank you, Leandra. Thanks for taking that moment. All right. Well, thanks for participating in that poll. All right. We'll go to. So now we're going to move into the trauma-informed principles related to supervision and self-care. In our previous 2 sessions, I talked a lot about trauma-informed approaches and how being trauma-informed helps us to give context and perspective on self-care. These trauma-informed concepts can help us understand what is going on with ourselves, as well as understand what might need tending, and what we might need to put some attention to. I'm going to take an approach around this conversation today with using the 6 trauma-informed principles. These principles, when I've trained on them before, are generally used to form a trauma-informed structure around service delivery and working with clients, but I really believe they can be used to create a structure and guide for creating an organizational culture of self-care and team support. I do want to acknowledge that many times I get feedback in self-care trainings that people are looking for a magical solution from a training when it comes to self-care or to be a good supervisor. And it can feel frustrating when you don't feel like you're getting that from the training. And I completely understand that. But I want to say, and I believe that self-care takes a lot of time and effort. And it takes time to understand what the needs are and to learn about some ways that you could meet those needs. And sometimes we have to try many different things to find what works. And along the way, you may make mistakes. But my advice after many years of supervising is to just keep on going, keep trying, keep learning and growing, stop and listen, and stay true to your values and who you are. And so I'm hoping that the discussion that we have around these trauma-informed principles will help to encourage you to consider maybe some new ways or some different ways or some broader ways around how to approach being a supervisor and supporting your team, as well as considering new ways around addressing the need for self-care. So the trauma-informed principles, the 6 trauma-informed principles that I want to focus on today are safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, historical, cultural, and gender concerns. And we're going to talk through each of them in the next few slides. I also want to say that when I've had conversations with supervisors about utilizing these trauma-informed principles, that it's been interesting because some supervisors feel that operating from these principles might be too soft, and that they feel that being a supervisor involves being direct and directive, that it involves correcting mistakes, disciplining bad behaviors, being authoritative. But in my opinion, if you're operating from that way and that you think that maybe operating from these trauma-informed principles is too soft, that it may feel like holding on to power that doesn't really exist. Because when we operate in a trauma-informed way, we're actually evening out the power dynamic. And it allows the team member that we're working with to be empowered, which will ultimately make for a healthy and effective team. And I think that that's really our goal when it comes to supervision and being a leader. I want to acknowledge that people are having a hard time with all the life changes that are happening in the environment of COVID. And I want to just say that I don't feel like we can be supervisors and manage organizational operations in the same old way anymore. We have to be open to new ways of working. We have to be open to new ways of supporting staff and new ways of communicating. And even though things are feeling new and maybe something that we're not comfortable or familiar with, we can still get work done and we can still support each other. It just may look a little different. I also just want to say that these principles are also a really great structure that can be used to support equity, inclusion, and diversity in your organization. And as we go through each one of these principles, think about how they match and support a fair and inclusive environment. And we'll mention that as we also engage in talking about these principles. So we'll start with safety. You know, in my opinion, safety is the foundation of self-care. We haven't talked about that before, but I think that if someone is living or working or operating in a safe environment, that truly it allows for us to consider our need for self-care and our need for taking care of ourselves. Because if we feel more safe, then we have more self-capacity. We're not operating in our limbic systems, in our fight, flight, or freeze modes. Because when we feel safe, we're able to operate from the prefrontal cortex of our brains. And this is where we are able to make rational decisions and plans for actions. We can self-regulate our emotions and the actions we take. We can express empathy and compassion, and we can be kind and friendly. And so safety is a really important element for us to a safe space is a really important thing for us to create for our team, as well as for our team to create for the clients that they work with. I want to talk about two types of safety: physical safety and psychological safety. Physical safety is experiencing an environment that is free from the threat of to our physical well-being. And a lot of our jobs and our work puts us in unsafe situations. I think that sometimes we feel that operating that in unsafe situation is just fine and part of the job, but it shouldn't be. In my experience in doing this work, I have witnessed many unsafe situations. I've also seen many unsafe situations. I could tell you tons and tons of stories where staff and colleagues that I worked with have been in really unsafe situations, and the outcomes could have been really devastating, and luckily they weren't. But it was really important for me as a leader in those situations that involved me to make sure that I was ultimately taking care of my staff and preventing them from engaging in those situations that are not safe. Because it's not okay for our staff or our team to be engaging in unsafe situations. And it is important for us to set plans and policies that support our team and make the work safe. Psychological safety is experiencing an environment that supports emotional and mental health. If a workplace lacks psychological safety, that's because maybe people are experiencing being insulted, treated unfairly, bullied, they're lectured to, they're blamed for when things going wrong, they might be experiencing anger from their supervisor, or they might be experiencing microaggressions from their teammates. And all of that can lead to an environment that doesn't feel safe psychologically. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that we're being aware of all of those things that are happening, because sometimes those are not always obviously seen. And also those are maybe things that we're participating in and that we're supporting. And so it's really important for us to take time to evaluate that. Take time to pay attention to what's happening, what are those relational dynamics that are happening, and what can we do to change those. Because we can really do long-term harm to our team if we are not operating in a safe way. And ultimately, if we're impacting our team in a safe way, our clients will also be impacted by that as well. So yeah, the first step to becoming, to take around safety is becoming aware about how safe things are in the organization. Take a look at the physical space. Include your parking lot. Include the walk up to your space. What's going on there? Are there any opportunities for things to be unsafe? Consider both safety for your team as well as your client. Look at how your team might be interacting with clients. What are we asking them to do when it comes to client service? And then along with that, take a review of policies and procedures and determine what supports a safe environment and maybe what policies and procedures you need to create that would support safety. I will just share that early in my career as a supervisor, we didn't have strong policies and procedures around safety, and so we had case managers. I supervised case managers directly earlier in my career, and they were going out and doing home visits by themselves. And, it took a really scary situation for us to realize that we needed to have some policies and procedures that didn't allow for that, that didn't allow for case managers to do home visits by themselves, to really evaluate if a home visit was necessary, if the client could come into the office, if they could meet in another place, another service agency, and if they did need to do a home visit, that there would be two people that would go with them on that home visit, one person working with the client and the other person paying attention to the environment and what's going on, so that they could make some decisions if they needed to cut that visit short. But also evaluate your own actions. Are you a safe person? would you know that? Paying attention to how your team is responding to you. What would your team say about you? Would they say that you're a safe person? Pay attention to what other supervisors are doing. What are they doing? Are they creating safe space or unsafe space? And when I'm talking about that, are you approachable? Are you someone that's going to hold confidences? Are you going to be supportive of your team? Are you someone that your team trusts? And we're going to talk about trust later. It's also really important to include your team in these assessments, hear what they have to say, and respond to those things that need attention. Don't dismiss feedback. Sometimes feedback and constructive criticism can be hard to hear, and it can be a little painful, but don't dismiss it. It can be really useful. It really can be powerful for you, because we may not always be aware of what we're doing and how it impacts the team. I periodically ask my team for feedback about if I'm being supportive, if I'm doing something that's insensitive, is there something I can do to improve? And when I get feedback, I respond to it. I make those changes and I follow through. And I think it's really made better relationships between me and my team. Training team on safety, training supervisors on communication skills. I'm really a fan of concepts related to nonviolent communication and emotional intelligence. Do some safety training on how to be safe in the field and in the office. And it's hard, and these trainings they're also very important. And I know we're not in offices right now, but trainings on active shooter situations or other violent situations that could happen in your workspace are also very important and very helpful. Let's go to poll question number 4, please, Leandra. Yeah, so I just want to get a sense of what you all think. Would you say this statement is true or false or unsure? My organization is a safe place to work. And so, yeah, true, false, unsure, or we need to work on it. All right, let's go ahead and broadcast those results. And I'm really glad to see that the majority of folks are saying that their organization is a safe place to work. I'm really glad to see that folks are feeling that way. And I also see that some folks are saying we need to work on it. And I think that's an important realization to have. It's important to make sure that you're assessing that and realizing if you need to work on some things. So, all right, thank you for that full question. Trustworthiness and transparency. So I think it's really interesting to talk about this because recently my team, we've been working on our team values, and we've been going through a process around this. And transparency was consistently the #1 value on each individual's values list. And it so far has made the top 5 in our values, and our team values. When we're transparent, we're being fully open about what's happening in the organization, what the priorities are, what we're working on, what the successes are, what the challenges are. We're talking about where we need help. When you're fully transparent, you're answering all the questions. It creates an environment where the team is not wondering about what is really going on. And when we're transparent, it also helps us to hold ourselves accountable, and we can act with integrity when we are being transparent, or it's important for us to act with integrity when we're being transparent, that we're being honest in our transparency, and that we are being consistent, and that we're also following through with things. Because then people will know what to expect from us, and we can admit our mistakes more comfortably, and we can hold ourselves to do better. And this also just allows us to be more responsive to the needs of our team and our clients. And when we're transparent, this leads to a sense of trust. And when there's trust, then people feel safe. And there's less negativity in the workplace, less gossip. And yeah, ultimately create an environment that is healthy because safety and trust exist. And again, just, when I say be real, I'm just saying, like, be honest with what you are sharing and be truthful about it too. Because I think when we work in these public sector agencies, we have a responsibility to that truth. I have to work really closely with our community planning group, and I am overly transparent with that group about a lot of things that relate to them. And what I find is, after I've presented on something and talked it through, there's not a lot of questions because I've covered so many of the things that they are wanting to know. And I think the feedback that I've gotten from that's felt really good. It's felt really good to have that relationship that's transparent because they can trust the information that they're getting from us. Let's put up poll question number 5, please, Leandra. Okay, so this is a question about yourself. How would you rate yourself when it comes to transparency? I'm doing great, I could do better, transparency is not important to me, or I'm not sure. All right, let's go ahead and broadcast those results. Looks like most of the folks feel like they're doing great with transparency, and that's really good to hear. Some folks say they could do better, and some folks are saying that they're not sure. So, yeah, I think that if you feel like you need to put some attention to transparency and figure out how to be more transparent, I think that that's a good first step in the right direction. All right, thank you, Leandra, for that poll. Okay, peer support. So this is definitely something that I have found to be really helpful and valuable in client services. And I think it's something that we overlook in terms of how we can create an environment around self-care and wellness in our organization. Shared experience can be really powerful, and it offers a great opportunity to express and to experience empathy, and that is a really powerful element in creating a resilient team and resilient individuals. I really highly encourage you to include your team in your organization's self-care work. Offer the opportunity for a self-care group. This can be a group where the team discusses self-care concepts, where they can provide some support to each other regarding self-care, and where they could also inform the process for the organization around self-care as well. I have found that when you create space for these groups, that a lot of folks really like to participate in that. It feels really empowering to them, and also it's a way that they can share with each other. I think mentor programs can be really helpful, pairing an experienced team member with newer ones. This is really effective when you have a healthy culture and that the more experienced team members are actualized in a healthy way in your work. I did this when I supervised case management programs. So when we'd have a new case manager coming in, we would pair them with a more experienced case manager. And this is really beneficial to both folks. It really validated, I think, the experienced case manager's work and their experience and their knowledge and skill. It increased their confidence. And it also just allowed for a really direct one-on-one way and pragmatic way and really engaged way around training new folks as well. To engage your team around that can be really powerful. Staff recognition is another really powerful element here. Making sure to recognize staff when they do good work and when they contribute to an effort or process. Appreciations don't always have to come from you. They can come from peers. And that's also maybe even more powerful sometimes than hearing it from you. In my team, we start our team meetings out with appreciation time, and so everybody's sharing something that they appreciated, particularly about someone in the past week, something that someone helped them with, or something that someone was just there for them around a particularly challenging situation. So yeah, recognition really can make a huge difference for folks. Understanding what burnout looks like can be really is really helpful too, and engaging your team to support each other around burnout can be really powerful. But you also have to create that safe and trusting space so that the team can talk about very authentically what their burnout experience is and what their limits are. And then finding ways for folks to be able to support each other around that and to be responsive when they're recognizing that someone's having a hard time and experiencing burnout. And again, the last thing is that identify team values. This can be really helpful for team members to get to know each other and to learn how to support each other. This definitely has been really powerful and important in my team as they've gotten to know each other and as they've formed as a team. Collaboration and mutuality. Again, this is about evening the power dynamic and empowering your team around their work and giving them more opportunity to have some ownership around their work as well. This requires us to meet our team where they are, to understand what they want from their work, learning how to support that success, their individual successes. And again, values can be really helpful in us understanding where our team members are and what they need and how we can support them. I also think that it's super important to have regular and consistent one-on-one meetings. And how often you have these, I think, depends on what your individual team member needs. Do you need to do these only monthly? Are you needing them weekly or every 2 weeks? But holding that space, that one-on-one time for up to an hour can be really helpful. It gives really some focused time for your team member, gives you an opportunity to get to know them, for them to get to know you, and to provide some support that they need. It's really important that if you're scheduling these meetings not to miss them and to reschedule meetings if you need to. And I also think it's important to come to the meeting with a structure. Do you have an agenda for the meeting? Are you talking about difficult work issues? Are you celebrating successes? Are you talking about client situations and processing those? Do you give some time to teaching a new piece of knowledge or some new skills? You take time then just to check in about how they're doing and how their self-care is going. And also maybe on the agenda you want to be able to revisit the takeaways from that meeting as well as some of the action items. And the most important piece of advice that I feel like I can give someone who supervises is to listen. Listen, listen, listen. And then validating the person's experience and joining with them, because that can help to support safety and trust and create those environments of safety and trust. I love talking, and I think that's why I do trainings, but so listening is something that I definitely have to put a lot of attention to and make sure that I'm actually creating that space where I'm listening more than I'm talking in my one-on-ones with my staff. So let's put up poll question number 6, please. I just want to get a check-in with you. Tell me, answer this question. I regularly have one-on-one meetings with the individual members of my team. Yes, no, I want to start having them. I want to be more consistent with having them. All right, let's go ahead and broadcast those results. Right, so it looks like the majority of people are having one-on-one meetings with your team, and I love hearing that. And it looks like some folks are wanting to be more consistent in having them, and I think that's really important and will really help and go a long way. And, you know, it's so interesting because when I started in my role, my supervisor wasn't so in the habit of having one-on-one meetings with his team, and I really forced the issue of him having a consistent weekly check-in with me. It doesn't have to be very long, or it could be long depending on what we need to talk about. And I think it's been really helpful and powerful for both of us, and I know I've really appreciated it, and he also said that he appreciates it as well. So, you know, look at your schedule, look at your team's schedule if you're not having these regular one-on-ones, and find time when you can do that, and find the amount of time that really works for them. It could be a really important and powerful event that you have with your team. And again, listen. All right, thank you, Leandra, for that poll. Okay, the next concept is empowerment, voice, and choice. Does your team feel safe enough to talk to you about their experiences at their work? Are you being responsive? Yeah, you know, I was talking to one of my team members just this morning who was really honest with me about a particular task and project she's been working on and how she hates it. And she doesn't want to do it. And she really needs some help with it. And we just talked through all of that. And, you know, I just listened. I validated her experience. I joined with her. I know that if that was one of my primary tasks, I would actually hate it as well. And it wouldn't be fun for me. But we talked through some ways that we could troubleshoot that, and also just recognize that it just may not be a task that fits her interest and skills, and what else could we do with that particular task. And again, that requires us to have a place of safety and trust where someone can be that honest and vulnerable to be able to come and talk to you about it. And that you're allowing them to be able to make some different decisions about their job, and that we can make some adjustments too. I think a lot of times we set up jobs and job descriptions, and this is the way it's going to be, and this is what the person is supposed to do, and that's what we evaluate their performance on, and that also hinges on pay increases. But if we have some flexibility to really match tasks and projects to someone's skills and interests, I think that can be really powerful and feel really supportive for the team. So understanding what people are passionate about and what they want to do, because people come to this work because of their passions. Ask for input and feedback in providing options. Okay, and then the last principle is historical culture on gender concerns. How are you defining what equity, inclusion, and diversity means in your organization? That is a really great question. My team, we were just talking about this yesterday as we were talking about our values, and equity, inclusion, and diversity are definitely in the top of our values as well. But we really want to know what those mean, what the definition is, and what we're really doing here. Are we just being performative and saying that we value diversity, or are we really acting on it? And so that takes a real evaluation of what's going on in the organization, as well as your own practices, to know if you really do value equity, inclusion, and diversity, and if you do want to live up to what those mean. And again, starting from the basics, go back to the concepts of safety and trust. Is your organization a safe place for everyone? Is it welcoming to your team and clients of diverse identities? Are you walking the talk? Are you demonstrating an environment of listening, learning, growing, and doing better? And are you providing information and education to staff around these issues? Bring people in to talk about these topics. Suggest reading materials. Have discussions with the team about what's going on and how you can do better. Our HIV team, we're part of the Community and Behavioral Health Division at the Health Department. And we have division meetings every 2 weeks as a way to support and engage and to check in with everyone, especially since we've all been working remotely. And equity, inclusion, and diversity are a part of every conversation, every meeting. And we've also had opportunities for trainings, discussion sessions, resource sharing, and just getting understanding what everybody's experience could be. It's really important to keep the conversation going. We've had a lot of momentum around racial justice recently, and what I think we've seen and experienced before, we get a lot of attention about it, that tension wands and something else comes up, and so we lose the momentum around the conversation. And I think that right now is the time to keep the conversation going and not lose that momentum. Also review your organizational policies to see if they include or exclude people. What are your recruitment and promotion practices? Do they give opportunity for everyone? What are your policies around safety, and what will you not allow? Do you have policies that support families? Do you have policies that support diversity in sexual orientation and gender expression? Or do you have policies that drive the do you have policies that allow for all gender restrooms, for example? Do you have signage and information out in your lobbies that are welcoming of all people? Those are some things to really think about when you're thinking about how your organization is really set up to support the issues of equity, inclusion, and diversity. Let's pull up poll question number 7, please. So again, just to take a temperature, like my organization has a clear understanding of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Answers being yes, no, we're working on it, or we're not sure. All right, let's go ahead and broadcast the results. It looks like majority of people are saying yes, that they have a clear understanding, and I'm so glad to hear that. And then also, again, folks are saying that they're working on it, and that's really important too. Putting the time and effort into it is really important. All right, thank you for that poll question, Indra. All right. So again, I want to come back to your own self-care process. So in order to create an organizational culture that values and operates with self-care, again, it's really important that you're taking care of yourself so that you can be a support to others. In the first 2 sessions, we talked a lot about the individual's experience around self-care and things that you can do for yourself. And so, those trainings could be another resource to revisit and to review and to refresh your minds around that, and consider what it is that you're needing, and take an assessment of yourself. Are you needing some more self-care? Are you needing to pay more attention to your own health and wellness? And again, self-care doesn't make all the stresses go away, but it can give you the capacity to handle stress in a more healthy way. And so self-capacity, I think, is really helpful as a supervisor, because as supervisors, we take in so much stuff all day long, all the good, all the bad, all the frustrations, all the challenges, all the successes. We take in a lot of people's energy all day, whether it's our staff's energy, our peers' energy, our clients' energy. We take in a lot. So reviewing those concepts around self-capacity and checking in on your own self-capacity can be really important. And self-regulation, as I was talking about earlier, are you showing up in a bad mood at work? Are you grouchy? Are you focused on the negative and everything that's going wrong? We talked about self-regulation. One of the elements, or one of the ways we could self-regulate, was to reframe things. So starting to re-look at things and think about them differently, not so much from all the negative that's there, but what are some of the strengths and the positives that are there as well. Putting ourselves in a more positive frame of mind when we're coming into work, because emotions are contagious. And if we're in a negative place, our team and our colleagues could also be affected by that. It's so interesting. I was just asking my team the other day what they thought, as I was getting ready for this training, what they thought was important in regard to self-care and supervision. And the three things that they told me was that just asking the question was a big deal, that it really demonstrated that self-care is important to me and that they feel that self-care has been an important part of the work that we've been doing together. They also just appreciated that, or they also thought it was important that I was modeling self-care in a really authentic way, not a perfect way, but just in a really truthful way, that I was bringing some balance to life and work, and that I wasn't always just focused on work, and overworking, but that I was also engaging in my own personal life. And then the last one was the safety and communication, to talk about what is challenging, to talk about what limits are, and where folks need help and support. So it was just a really great conversation that we had as a team that I wanted to share here. Okay, we're going to, and I know we're going over a little bit of time, but I wanted to just talk a little bit about an organizational self-care process. These are some steps that I think you can take if you feel like you need to do some work around creating an organizational culture around self-care. First of all, acknowledging the environment, knowing what's going on in your organization. Is your team experiencing burnout? Is there a feeling of safety and trust among the team? What's happening and what needs attention? What needs to change? Second point here is training and information sharing around self-care and health and wellness, and bringing awareness to the questions and showing that that's important. An organizational doing an organizational assessment and creating a plan. Survey your staff and see what's happening and what they think needs to happen and what the needs are. Have listening sessions. One of the things I used to do when I worked for the nonprofit I worked for was having breakfast time, where you have coffee and maybe donuts, bagels, or if you want to go healthier, bring in some fruit. And just have some open listening sessions, some open time for people to share what their experience is and what they think that is going on in the agency and what we can do better. Again, creating a self-care group, a group that can support each other, or a group that can help inform the process of creating organizational self-care culture. Again, listen, but when you're listening, make sure you're responding. Make sure that you're responding to what folks are saying to you and follow through with things. And then lastly, promote a culture of wellness that's without pressure. Don't pressure people into self-care, especially if they're not ready. Just create the space and the opportunity for people to participate in their own way at their own pace. As I've talked about in previous sessions, self-care is defined by everyone differently. It's an individual understanding of what's going on with themselves and what they need. One of the things that I consistently see that I'm not really a big fan of is when people put rewards on self-care, particularly when it comes to exercise, healthy eating, or weight loss, because I think this puts a lot of pressure on people and sends a message that we feel that they're unhealthy in what they're doing and we're not being sensitive in where people are. It puts a priority on something that's not a priority for the individual. So I like to just point that out as an example of something that you might consider as a way to encourage self-care, but it might not be the most helpful way. So again, using your team to inform the process is really helpful, because I think it's really important for us to get our self-care right. Okay, we're going to end with one more poll question. Could we do poll question number 8, please, Leandra? All right. So of these things we just quickly talked about, which of the following do you think would be important for your organization in creating a culture of self-care? Is it self-care information sharing and awareness, organizational assessments, creating a plan, creating self-care groups, listening, responding, and following through, or promoting a culture of wellness without pressure? Which one of these do you think would be important for your organization in creating a culture of self-care? All right. Give a couple more seconds. All right, let's go ahead and broadcast those results. Yeah, so let's see. Oh, it changed. It looks like most people are saying that information, self-care information sharing is important, but it looks like a lot of things are important here, like doing an organizational assessment, creating a plan, creating self-care group, and promoting culture of wellness without pressure. So great. There's a lot of opportunities here I can see. All right, thank you for that poll question. Okay, so that's the end of our session today. I hope that it was helpful for you. Now we can have I think we have just a few minutes, not very long, for questions. So I think Leander is going to unmute folks if you want to speak up and ask a question, or you can always put one in the chat too. I also like to hear any ideas that you have about things that you and your organization are doing that are working as you support self-care.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I just activated self-muting mode. If you want to unmute yourself, you have to press *# on your phone, and then make sure your phone is unmuted locally as well if you'd like to speak on the line.
Or again, you can put a question or comment in the chat.
Robert, while folks are kind of thinking, maybe you want to put something in the chat or speak on the phone line, I have a question to kind of kick us off. So
sure,
I know specifically for the peer support part, you talked about, creating listening sessions or self-support or self-care groups, things like that. Mm-hmm. What do you say when you encounter organizations that say, we don't have time to do that? We have such a large workload. There's a lot of competing priorities. What do you say to supervisors especially, but not necessarily supervisors either, but, organizations that have that issue?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I validate that experience because I know that that's true. Folks do have a lot going on and big workloads. But what I say about that is that if you're not making self-care a priority and you're not creating a culture around self-care, then the work's not going to get done in the way that you would like it to get done. People are going to get burned out quickly. People are going to experience stress. And so if you want your services to be effective and great services for your community, then you have to invest time. You have to slow down and invest time in your team and make sure that they're getting the support that they need, that they're able to do their work in a way that feels good for them. And so even though you might not feel like you have time, taking that time is going to save you in the long run. It's going to really support the quality of services that you want to provide. So it's just a matter of taking that time.
Great, yeah, thank you. Any other questions from folks on the line or either in the chat box? Again, it's *# to unmute yourself on your phone, and make sure your phone is unmuted locally as well. Be still up typing. They may have a question for us.
Yeah, something. What would you consider burnout? Yeah, we talked about burnout a little bit in our last session, and burnout can be a lot of things. It can be everything from just being super tired and super exhausted all the time, feeling that physical effect of having too much work or really hard and heavy work. It can also be an experience of just lack of motivation, just not feeling motivated or excited or passionate about the work that's in front of you, that you just come in and just try to go through the motions just to get through the day. It could also be that the workload and the stress is affecting you in a way that you're avoiding work. You're avoiding doing things. You're putting things off. You're procrastinating. You're getting behind on things. It can look like that as well. So burnout is the effect of maybe doing things over and over in a way that doesn't feel energizing to you. And that can be really tiring and exhausting. Burnout could be just the effect of doing hard work all the time without any sort of support or relief. And not having good self-care or not getting good support from your supervision, and just being in that place that doesn't feel good all the time. So, and just the normal stresses and expectations of the work can also create a burnout situation.
Great.
And again,
Thank you,
that's
Robert.
why it's not a unique experience to someone. Like, your coworkers might be experiencing too. You may not notice it, but once you start talking about it, it can be really powerful. That shared experience can be really powerful in terms of figuring out what to do to change that for yourself. Because I don't think that people naturally like to operate in a burnout situation. So, and then Philip said emotional burnout from hearing so many people's problems. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have another question as well. If there aren't any others from the chat or on the line, I'll give it a second, though. I know we have a couple minutes left.
Okay. It's fun. You can see people typing.
Yeah.
In the chat. Or it may have gone away. I don't know.
Okay. If not, I'll go ahead
you want
and
to ask your
my
question?
Sure, yeah. So this question is for people maybe at large organizations. Like NCSD, we're pretty small. We have about a dozen people on staff. But what about larger organizations, right? Let's say you're getting into, 50 to 100 people or even larger. How can they do the action steps that you mentioned and truly use those trauma-informed principles if you're supervising a large team, for example?
Yeah, I think that can come with a lot of challenges, but you definitely, I think it's still important to have that top leadership support of what you're doing, that top leadership values self-care and is talking about it as an element of the culture. That's really important too. But I think sometimes the large organizations the experience can be somewhat siloed too, because you are so large and you have specific teams working on specific things. And so you can take a lot of these concepts and just work them with your smaller teams. And then as supervisors, it's important to join with each other, each team lead, and talk about what you're doing and sharing those experiences and learning from each other and what each one of your teams is doing around self-care. And then pushing that up as well so that your upper management is aware of what's happening and can support it, because maybe you're needing some extra resources to support your particular work. So you need maybe some of your higher leadership to support that. And so communication is really key, even if you're in a situation where the work that you're doing might be just with your particular team that's a smaller group. But creating a space as well as a culture of communication around that is also important and can be helpful in that process. I did that. We were a large nonprofit serving the state of Colorado, and so we had offices in 4 different locations across the state, and everybody was doing something around self-care, and talking about it, and it all looked a little different, but we were trying to bring all of those concepts together so we could learn from each other and ask our CEO for resources when we needed it.
Great, thank you.
Philip said, do you suggest exercise as a release for emotional burnout? Exercise can be great. If that's something that really works for you, there's a lot of benefits from movement, from exercise. It can increase the hormones in our brain, like dopamine, that help us to feel good, and can be a really good release and relief from stress and burnout. So yeah, can be. I think we're at time, but we can take another question if someone has one.
I want to make sure this last person gets their question in. I've seen them typing for a while.
Yeah.
Or maybe not.
Yeah.
It went away. I'll go ahead and wrap us up, Robert, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you so much for another enlightening presentation for us for this third part of the series for self-care and supervision. Robert's information is on the slide. If you have additional questions that may come up for you or from your team, feel free to reach out to him and he'd be happy to answer those. Please complete the webinar evaluation. You'll be redirected to the SurveyMonkey once this webinar ends, so please complete that. Tiffany has also put the link to the evaluation in the chat box. The webinar recording and presentation slides will be shared with all of those who registered today, and it will be placed on the NCSD website, so be on the lookout for that. Here is the registration link for the last final part of our series, Self-Care and Intersectionality. That will be occurring September 30th at the same time, 3:15 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern. And we're taking a little bit of a longer break between this webinar and the next one due to the STD Prevention Conference that's occurring September 14th through the 24th. So we want to be mindful that a lot of you may be participating in that. But the registration link is there. I'll also send the registration link out to you all that register. It'll also be on the NCSD website as well. So, yes, thank you so much. Thanks again, Robert, for a great presentation. And, yeah, everyone enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you all on September 30th. Take care.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.